His motivations in the comics are very different. In the comics, not only does a physical embodiment of death exist, she's a pretty lady. Because of course she is, it's a comic book. Thanos is madly in love with death and would do anything to get her to notice him. His entire reason for obtaining the gauntlet and wiping out half of the universe was to impress her. He's basically Lloyd Dobler from Say Anything, except instead of a boombox, he has genocide. Have you ever watched a movie and forgot which character you're supposed to be rooting for? I know that Thanos is super evil, but he is so freaking awesome. He throws a moon at Iron Man. That's the coolest thing that's ever happened in a movie. I mean, except for when the Avengers finally defeated him, of course, because I was totally rooting for them to win. Sorry guys. So Thanos is basically a movie bad guy legend now. He has millions of fans who love to hate him around the world. What many don't know is that Thanos has been just as awesome for decades. He first appeared in the Invincible Iron Man number 55, written by the legendary Jim Starlin. Since then, he's gone on to become the greatest villain in Marvel Comics. While both versions are amazing, they have some major differences. Their origins, motivations, and powers are vastly different. So let's dive into Thanos' major differences in the movie versus the comics. The MCU version of Thanos considers himself to be quite the hero. In his mind, the universe is overpopulated and must be regularly purged for the sake of all life. His ultimate goal is to get the Infinity Gauntlet in order to destroy half of all life in the universe. He could have just increased the universe's resources, but that isn't as dramatic, I guess. What's worse is that in Avengers Endgame, he desires to destroy all life and start over. It's really hard to top the evil of destroying half of the universe, but somehow he manages. His motivations in the comics are very different. In the comics, not only does a physical embodiment of death exist, she's a pretty lady. Because of course she is, it's a comic book. Thanos is madly in love with death and would do anything to get her to notice him. His entire reason for obtaining the gauntlet and wiping out half the universe was to impress her. He's basically Lloyd Dobler from Say Anything, except instead of a boombox, he has genocide. Someone should tell him that the friend zone isn't a real thing and that there are plenty of fish in the sea. Lots of fans thought that Thor Ragnarok's Hela was going to end up being the MCU version of death. The two had a bit of a thing in the comics anyway, so it would connect. He really has a type, doesn't he? It's probably good that they didn't get together. The Avengers probably couldn't have taken a power couple that evil. While the personification of death may not make an appearance in the MCU, the filmmakers still got his motivations from the comics. He explains his views that overpopulation destroys all life when talking to the Silver Surfer. This is the conversation that leads him to warn the Avengers that Thanos is coming. In the MCU, they only slightly refer to Thanos' origins. Evidently, he was a prominent member of the society on the planet Titan. He did some research and discovered that overpopulation was going to destroy the planet. His incredibly reasonable proposition? That they had a lottery and kill off half the planet. Naturally, he was exiled as a madman. I mean, they had the technology to leave the planet. Why didn't he suggest a mass migration instead of a mass murder? The guy really has a flair for the dramatic. He ended up being right about the overpopulation, not the genocide, in the end, and Titan destroyed itself. It's sad that Thanos didn't have anyone to tell, I told you so. His origin in the comics is a lot different. To be honest, the comics Thanos makes the megalomaniac MCU version look pretty tame in comparison. In fact, he was so evil that his mother tried to end his life seconds after he was born. That tactic would make James Rhodes very proud. He grew up as a freak among the other Titans. For starters, he had what's known as the deviant gene. While everyone else basically looked human, he looked all purple and grimace-like. His popularity didn't increase when it was discovered that he was a ruthless serial killer. He got exiled and became an interstellar space pirate. He spent much of his early adulthood attacking planets and dating lots of alien ladies. Once he realizes that Mistress Death is his one true love, he decides to impress her at all costs. So he tracks down all of his offspring from his active dating life and destroys them. Yeah, you thought Gamora and Nebula had father issues. Then he decides to destroy his entire race himself to impress Death. It shouldn't come as a huge shock to anyone, but Death didn't exactly swoon. In the MCU, Thanos makes his fighting debut taking on the Hulk. He goes full Mike Tyson on Hulk, turning him back into Bruce Banner in a matter of seconds. As impressive as that was, it doesn't have anything on the comics Thanos, though it's practically impossible to defeat the comic book Hulk that easily anyway. While the MCU Thanos has strength, stamina, and intelligence to spare, the comics version has a lot more to work with. For starters, he has the ability to absorb and discharge cosmic energy. He's also shown to possess limited telekinesis and telepathy. In the MCU, he is shown on quite a few thrones. While they are definitely impressive, the comics version is much more functional. It's basically a mobile command center. In fact, he can use it to teleport over huge distances across the galaxy. That, and I'm sure it has epic cup holders. The comics version of Thanos is so powerful that he's fought the likes of Galactus, Black Bolt, and Captain Marvel with no gauntlet. Sadly though, he doesn't have this really cool sword from the movie. It's like he fought Darth Maul and was like, I can do better than that. In the MCU, it's kind of hard to tell what his actual plan was. At some point, he obtains the Mind Stone after years of searching. Then he gives the Mind Stone to Loki along with an army. Loki is tasked with stealing the Space Stone from Earth in return for ruling the planet. This doesn't work out because trusting Loki is really stupid. Then he doubles down on the stupidity by trusting Ronan the Accuser to get him the Power Stone. It shouldn't come as much of a surprise, but Ronan betrays Thanos and takes the stone for himself. That's when Thanos finally has enough and decides to do it himself. He attacks the dwarves, forcing Eitri to make him the Infinity Gauntlet and goes after the stones. Evidently, he destroys Xandar off-screen to get the Power Stone. Then he goes after the Asgardians and finally gets the Space Stone from Loki. After that, he gets the Reality Stone from the Collector and sacrifices his daughter for the Soul Stone. Now that he has most of the stones at his disposal, he takes on the Avengers for the last two. After he barely manages to defeat them twice, he uses the gauntlet to wipe out half the universe and destroy them. That's quite the convoluted plan. It's almost as if his entire plan is made up of plots from unrelated movies that are loosely connected. His plan in the comics is much more straightforward. He uses his fancy teleporting chair to transport across the galaxy and collect the stones. In order to do so, he has to engage in a battle of wits with the keepers of the Infinity Gems. Originally, they were gems and not stones. First, he takes on the In-Betweener, a cosmic prisoner who holds the Soul Gem. After he frees the man, he pulls the gem out of his head like he did Vision in the MCU. He then fights the champion of the universe, the Gardener, and the Runner. It's basically like fighting an intergalactic Hulk, Flash, and Poison Ivy. He walks away from those confrontations with the Power Gem, the Time Gem, and the Space Gem. After that, he takes on the Collector and the Grandmaster, yes, the same characters from the MCU. He tricks the Collector into giving the Reality Gem just like he did in the movie. Then he engages in the final battle of wits with the Grandmaster for all the marbles. They play an awesome game of gladiatorial chess with each other that the Grandmaster wins. Thanos ends up cheating though and takes the Mind Gem from him. Infinity War was pretty great, but it's hard not to feel let down knowing that Thanos could have fought against Jeff Goldblum. Why would you deprive us of that, Marvel? Both Thanos in the MCU and Thanos in the comics have massive egos. You know you've got it bad when you have a hype man like Ebony Maw following you around to tell people how incredible you are. The comics version is ever known to erecting the odd statue in his own honor. The ego of comic Thanos isn't quite as invincible as MCU's Thanos is. In the comics, Thanos has actually achieved godhood several times. Before the Infinity Gauntlet, Thanos was obsessed with something called the Cosmic Cube. It's basically the Tesseract from the MCU. Instead of it being an Infinity Stone though, it's an artifact that allows the user to reshape the universe. He uses it to basically become a god. Now that he's one with the entire universe, how could he possibly be defeated? Afterwards, he just leaves the cube unprotected. The original Captain Marvel destroys it, thus saving the universe. He loses in Infinity Gauntlet when he's basically achieved godhood all over again. So if Thanos keeps becoming the most powerful being in the Marvel Universe, how does he keep losing? It's well established now that Thanos' greatest enemy isn't the Avengers at all. His greatest enemy is Thanos. He continually allows his own defeat because he subconsciously doesn't believe he should win. It's possible that he knows deep down that his ideology is flawed. Some also believe that it's the time he spent bullied as a child that left him emotionally scarred. The exact answer for his known self-destructive tendencies is widely debated. What isn't debated is the fact that Thanos really needs a good therapist. Thanos in the MCU is pretty much the ultimate bad guy. While many thought that he might get a redemptive arc in Endgame, that didn't end up happening. In fact, he just got more evil in the sequel. Surprisingly, the comics version has been the hero of the universe on multiple occasions. This is very surprising considering the fact that comics Thanos is much more evil than MCU Thanos. MCU Thanos still thinks that he's the savior of the galaxy, even if he's actually the galaxy's biggest villain. Comics Thanos frequently cackles while enjoying his own evil ways. That's why it was so interesting to see Thanos try to be good after Infinity War. In a similar fashion to the MCU version, after the Infinity War, Thanos becomes a simple farmer. This doesn't stick, but after a few more cosmic adventures where he saves the universe, he really does try to make it as a hero. He even saves a planet from Galactus and then teams up with Galactus to stop a greater threat called the Hunger. This, of course, doesn't last long. He gives up the hero gig and goes back to being an intergalactic despot. This doesn't work out too well for him either. He gets defeated by Drax, defeated again by Dr. Doom, and somehow gets defeated by Squirrel Girl. To be fair, that last battle might not actually be canon. Still though, it's a humiliation that can't be washed away easily. Despite the fact that he's the biggest bad in the Marvel Universe, Comic Thanos really has a bad track record. A lot is made out of Thanos' family in the movies. He's a father to at least Gamora and Nebula. It's unclear if the rest of his cronies are also his adopted children. Regardless, it's clear that he's had some family dysfunction. Thanksgiving must have been really awkward at the Thanos household. Nebula and Gamora probably had to fight over who got to carve the turkey. The comics Thanos doesn't have a much better family life. We've already covered his quest to destroy his children. You probably wouldn't believe it, but he's actually meaner to Nebula in the comics as well. She gets to live, but not after a lot of torture. Gamora's relationship isn't much better though either, though she did get to stab Daddy Dearest recently. He won't stay gone long, but Gamora does get to be in the I Killed Thanos Club alongside Drax, Dr. Doom, and Adam Warlock. He also has a son, Thane, who looks just like him. They have a really sweet relationship. Just kidding. They tried to destroy each other immediately after meeting. His original family wasn't much better. He took out his own mom and destroyed his entire planet. His surviving family members have spent most of their Marvel Comics history trying to defeat him. This includes his father, Mentor, who seems to have taken over his wife's goal of ending their son's life. Heartwarming, right? Thanos' battles with the Avengers in Infinity War and Endgame are some of the best film fights ever. That being said, the comics version was even more intense. Thanos snaps away half the universe pretty early on in Infinity Gauntlet. Then the remaining Marvel heroes assemble into a super team to stop him. It does not go well. Instead of taking on small groups of Avengers or taking on all of them with an army, he goes solo against the whole Marvel universe. The Infinity Gauntlet comic features panel after panel of Thanos brutally defeating all of your favorite heroes. Everyone from Thor to Captain America gets shamefully taken down by the Mad Titan. The worst one is Wolverine. His adamantium bones get turned into rubber, leaving him helpless as all of his friends get taken out. The only way they're able to win is that Nebula manages to take the gauntlet off of his hand while he was distracted. Nebula was pretty cool in the movies, but she wasn't that cool. The comics Thanos is one of the most beloved supervillains of all time. You can barely visit a comic book forum without seeing someone debating if he's better than Darkseid or some other baddie. He's literally become the comic book villain that all other comic book villains have to compete against. That being said, it's pretty hard to compare the villain against his MCU counterpart. While the comic version is legendary, he lacks the depth and humanity that the MCU version has. That's not to say that he's better written in the film, it's just that the film has a secret weapon that the comics don't. That weapon is Josh Brolin. Through the magic of motion picture, Brolin manages to infuse the big purple baddie with an incredible amount of vulnerability. Watching his scene with Gamora is heartbreaking. Despite his status as the supreme evil of the galaxy, it's hard not to feel sorry for him. In many ways, he's just an incredibly misguided old man who wants to connect with his daughter. This is coupled with the way that Brolin lumbers around like a sore middle-aged man. He doesn't have the weightlessness of many CGI characters. You can almost feel how much his knees must hurt after all that Avengers fighting. Also, the designers gave Thanos a receding hairline and whiskers that are almost imperceptible. All he needs is a pipe and a bad Father's Day tie to really drive home the sad dad motif. The MCU version of Thanos really is one of the best comic adaptations. Even creator Jim Starlin loves him, and that's saying something. There is one thing that the comic version of Thanos has that the MCU one doesn't. Thanos tries to steal the Cosmic Cube yet again, but is thwarted by Hellcat. Yes, the same Hellcat from Jessica Jones. Imagine the MCU Thanos losing to Trish freaking Walker. What's so memorable about the confrontation is that he tries to get away using a giant yellow helicopter with his name on it. What's worse is that he actually gets arrested by the police and put in a squad car. Does he have a mugshot in the Marvel Comics universe? Since the Thanos copter has become quite the meme since Thanos made his MCU debut, it's too bad we'll never see it in action. So there you have it, the biggest differences between comics Thanos and MCU Thanos. Which one is your favorite? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more from The Binger.